You were the one who went up there, past the winter coats, past the cardboard boxes, until you found a stack of index cards held with a rubber band gone brittle, her handwriting on everyone. She never mentioned them. Here are 60 lost recipes we found in Grandma's attic after she passed. Beef and turnip hash was the kind of dish where nothing went to waste and everything was used. Ground beef or beef scraps were fried up with chopped turnips, potatoes, and onions in a skillet until browned and crispy. It was popular during the Depression era when root vegetables were cheap and plentiful, making them the perfect fillers for a meat dish. Families often used whatever they had on hand, and turnips gave a unique flavor that set it apart from other hashes. Served hot and sometimes topped with a fried egg, it became a hearty breakfast or dinner that stretched one small portion of meat into a full family meal. The hash was filling, flavorful, and affordable, exactly what working families needed during hard economic times. It might have been humble, but it carried with it the memories of survival, creativity, and stretching ingredients to their very limit in order to keep everyone fed. Squirrel stew was born from the woods, not the market. A family that could bring down a squirrel had meat enough for the pot, and that was reason to be thankful. Dressed, chopped, and simmered with onions, potatoes, and carrots, it became a thick, rich stew that smelled like Sunday comfort. No one thought twice about it. Hunting was just part of living. The flavor was earthy and wild, something that no city meal could imitate. Children learned early that nothing caught went to waste, and every bite carried the story of skill and effort. When times were lean, squirrel stew brought warmth, protein, and pride. It was not fancy, but it was honest and filling, the kind of food that fed both body and spirit. Around the table, folks shared not just supper, but the satisfaction of making something good from the land itself. The bread heel trick for keeping brown sugar soft was Grandmother's clever solution that cost nothing but solved everything. Brown sugar turned into a brick within days of opening, requiring a hammer to break apart. Grandma simply dropped a bread heel, the end piece nobody wanted anyway, into the container and sealed it tight. Within hours, rock-hard sugar transformed into soft, scoopable sweetness. Bread released moisture slowly, rehydrating the molasses coating without making sugar wet or clumpy. This hack turned kitchen scraps into problem solvers, using unwanted bread ends children pushed aside. Some grandmothers used apple slices or orange peels instead, adding subtle flavor while restoring texture. The trick worked for weeks, keeping sugar ready for cookies and oatmeal. Modern cooks buy expensive terracotta discs, never knowing a simple bread heel could solve the problem. Dandelion salad might sound like a fairy tale-like name for an incredibly frugal but delicious meal. By now, you might have noticed the scavenger vibe in terms of ingredients of the dishes so far. People making anything out of whatever they had on hand. Economic downturns often feature lifestyle changes, and the Great Depression was no other, sending people on a scramble to find and eat anything. Dandelion salad took scramble seriously as the meal involved finding and foraging dandelions. You would cut out all the roots, flowers, and waste to make the dressing for a very healthy salad. For people, especially those on a diet and a budget, this was a godsend. For a garnish, all people would usually put on it was lemon juice and olive oil. A dash of salt and you were good to go at basically no cost. Monterey Jack. Chicken bake brought a mellow southwestern kick to suburban kitchens where new flavors were starting to matter in the early 1980s. Boneless chicken pieces browned in a single skillet and then baked beneath a blanket of mild Monterey Jack cheese that melted into creamy ribbons over a quick sauce of diced tomatoes, bell peppers, and mild chili powder. This dinner felt adventurous compared to plain roasted chicken but never overwhelmed cautious palates, making it perfect for families who wanted something different without straying too far. The aroma of bubbling cheese and warm spices filled the house, and the dish could be served straight from the pan with tortillas or buttered noodles. Home cooks loved how easily leftovers reheated for school lunches or late-night snacks. It captured a small piece of the decade's growing love for Tex-Mex flavors while staying firmly in the realm of easy weeknight cooking, and that balance helped it become a quiet classic that many still remember fondly today. Macaroni and tomatoes was one of the simplest dishes ever served, yet it carried deep meaning in resourceful kitchens. Elbow pasta was boiled until tender, then simmered with stewed tomatoes, onions, and a touch of seasoning. It was cheap, easy, and satisfying, a way to stretch pantry ingredients into something warm and filling. This dish often appeared on weeknights when money was tight, providing comfort without extravagance. Its flavors were mild but hearty, with the sweet tomatoes coating every bite of pasta. Some families sprinkled a little cheese on top, while others kept it plain to save costs. It was not glamorous, but it was dependable, showing how much could be done with just a can of tomatoes and a box of pasta. Children grew up with it as a staple, and for many it became tied to memories of home. Today it has nearly vanished from dinner tables, but macaroni and tomatoes once stood proudly as proof that simplicity could taste like love. Salmon patties transformed canned fish into crispy golden discs that graced Friday dinner tables in Catholic households and blue-collar homes alike. Canned salmon, bones, skin, and all, was mashed with cracker crumbs, egg, and minced onion, then shaped into patties and fried until the exterior turned beautifully crisp while the inside stayed moist. The bones, soft from processing, were simply crushed and mixed in, providing calcium that working families might otherwise lack. Mothers served these with cream gravy poured over the top or alongside boiled potatoes and canned peas. A single can could stretch into 6 patties, making it economical when meat prices climbed. The distinctive smell of salmon frying announced dinner throughout the neighborhood. Children either loved or dreaded Friday salmon nights, but everyone cleaned their plates. This thrifty classic has nearly disappeared from modern kitchens, though those who remember it recall the satisfying crunch fondly. Breadcrumb stretchers were one of the oldest tricks in the frugal cook's playbook, and there's a reason they stuck around. The idea was simple but clever. When you didn't have enough meat to go around, bulk it up with breadcrumbs, or crushed cereal, oats, or even cracker dust. Suddenly, a single pound of beef became enough for 6 patties or a whole loaf. Old cookbooks from the 1930s through the 1970s had full sections devoted to stretchers, with ratios and substitutions depending on what you had on hand. The beauty of breadcrumbs was that they were essentially free, made from stale bread or saved scraps no one would eat anyway. When seasoned well and mixed with an egg or two, they helped hold everything together, add texture, and absorb flavor like a sponge. Meatballs, meatloaf, hamburger patties, even stuffed peppers relied on this trick to get by. This wasn't just about saving money, it was about survival with dignity. Families were able to enjoy their favorite meals without feeling the sting of scarcity quite so sharply. In a way, breadcrumb stretchers were the unsung heroes of wartime and Depression-era cooking, quietly making dinner possible one crumb at a time. Cabbage and rice bake was an act of comfort disguised as frugality. Leftover rice met cabbage and beef in a casserole dish, topped with breadcrumbs or a drizzle of milk to keep it moist. It baked until tender, the top golden, the smell rich and homey. This dish was how families turned scarcity into satisfaction. It filled bellies without emptying wallets, and its leftovers reheated even better the next day. Many cooks flavored it with paprika, garlic, or tomato, each one adding their own touch of love. The rice made it stretch further. The cabbage made it wholesome. The beef made it feel complete. Served in deep scoops with bread and butter, it was more than a meal. It was reassurance that even hard times could taste good. In quiet kitchens across America, cabbage and rice bake became the taste of perseverance made edible. Jellied chicken salad was a quintessential 1950s dish that combined cooked chicken with vegetables set in a savory gelatin mold, reflecting the era's fascination with molded salads. This dish often included diced chicken, celery, onions, and sometimes nuts or chopped pimentos, suspended in a flavorful gelatin base made from chicken broth and unflavored gelatin. Served cold and sliced, it was both a visual centerpiece and a tasty salad that showcased creativity in presentation. Jellied chicken salad was often made in advance, allowing flavors to meld and the gelatin to set firmly, making it practical for potlucks and large gatherings. Though it might seem unusual today, at the time it represented a sophisticated and modern way to serve cold salads. The dish balanced texture and flavor with a slightly savory taste and a firm yet tender mouthfeel. Its popularity was tied to the post-war era's emphasis on convenience, novelty, and communal sharing, making it a memorable part of many church potluck tables. Spinach and cottage cheese casserole was not flashy, but it was trusted. It was there on the weeknight table when meat was off the menu, when budgets were tight, or when someone declared it was time to eat lighter. The base was simple: fresh spinach, cooked down until it was soft but still green, then folded into cottage cheese, eggs, and breadcrumbs. Sometimes shredded cheddar joined the mix, sometimes not. It was baked in a glass dish until the top turned golden and the edges puffed up just enough to look proud. It smelled like spring cleaning, clean, warm, nourishing. In the 1970s, this dish carried weight, not because it was rich, but because it was smart. It made use of pantry staples and what grew in the backyard. It was a meatless main before anyone called them that. Today, spinach casseroles have gone gourmet or disappeared entirely. But this one had charm. It was honest. It filled your plate without weighing you down. And if you took a bite straight from the edge of the pan, it tasted like home. It was the kind of meal that made you feel like you were doing something good for yourself without making a big fuss about it. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches were once the quick, dependable breakfasts that carried children through school mornings. Long before energy bars and drive-through meals became common, parents spread peanut butter on slices of bread, drizzled honey on top, and wrapped them in paper within minutes. The combination was sticky, sweet, and protein-rich, making it both quick and nourishing. For many households, honey was easier to keep than jelly and paired perfectly with the earthy taste of peanut butter. Children often ate these sandwiches in the car, on the bus, or even walking to school, showing convenience foods were nothing new. It was the kind of breakfast that took under 5 minutes to prepare, but still felt indulgent compared to plain toast. Parents liked it because it kept energy steady through long mornings without needing a hot stove or heavy cleanup. Over time, advertising for cereal pushed it aside, framing sandwiches as lunch only. Yet those who grew up in the mid-century remember mornings that began with peanut butter and honey. Forgotten today, it once embodied the idea that the simplest meals were often the best. Sawdust dumpling stew did not have real sawdust, but you might have thought it did. It started with stale bread, so dry it crumbled like wood, and was shredded into dust, soaked in water, and mashed into a heavy paste. That paste got pinched into lumps, dropped into a weak broth made from bones or salted water, and boiled until swollen. The dumplings held their shape, barely. They were gray, dense, and heavy as stones. But they gave the illusion of a full pot. A single onion or garlic clove made it sing. Some added a splash of vinegar, others a pat of lard. But the dumplings were the point. They made you chew, they made you full, and they reminded you that bread, even at the end of its life, still had one more job to do. It was not elegant, but it was enough. And in kitchens where the wind blew through the cracks in the wall, that mattered more than taste. Hamburger pie with mashed sweet potatoes was a clever variation on shepherd's pie, made with ground beef, vegetables, and topped with a layer of sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes. It combined the savory meat filling with the natural sweetness of mashed yams, giving the dish a unique flavor that families loved. Sweet potatoes were inexpensive, filling, and grew well in southern soil, making them an ideal substitute when regular potatoes were not available or were too costly. The topping baked into a golden crust that balanced the rich beef mixture beneath, creating a dish that was both nourishing and frugal. Families often made it in large pans to stretch across multiple meals, a practical solution in years when every bit of food mattered. Grandparents remembered it as a comfort dish that blended resourcefulness with flavor, proving that necessity often produced meals that stood the test of time and memory long after the hardships were over. Fried green tomatoes with cornmeal crust were the South's way of saying waste nothing, because even an unripe tomato could still shine. When the vines hung heavy with fruit that would not turn red in time, thrifty hands sliced them thick, dusted them in cornmeal, and dropped them into sizzling bacon grease. The kitchen came alive with that familiar pop and crackle, the sound of hunger about to be satisfied. The slices fried, golden and crisp, tart inside and smoky outside, a perfect blend of garden freshness and skillet comfort. They were often served beside beans, greens, or gravy, completing a meal that cost almost nothing but tasted like plenty. Each bite carried the flavor of hard work, sunshine, and summer's patience. Mothers never measured. They just knew when the batter was right, and kids learned to flip them when the edges turned brown. Fried green tomatoes were proof that nothing in the South went to waste. Not time, not food, not love. They were simple, dependable, and unforgettable. The first bite snapped with tang. The last ended in quiet satisfaction. In every kitchen that made them, thrift became art, and every plate told the same story. Make do and make it delicious. Flour sack towels served purposes modern kitchen linens simply cannot match, and Grandma kept stacks for every task imaginable. These weren't purchased. They came from fabric bags that flour and sugar were packaged in. The cotton was tightly woven, lint-free, and incredibly absorbent, perfect for straining homemade cheese, covering rising bread dough, and drying dishes without streaks. Grandma bleached them white for kitchen use, but some women sewed printed versions into children's clothing and quilts. The towels improved with washing, becoming softer over years rather than falling apart like paper towels. They could be sterilized with boiling water for canning season and wrapped around delicate items for storage. When one finally wore thin, it became a cleaning rag, then patches for other towels. The journey from flour packaging to dust rag took decades, demonstrating a relationship with materials that disposable culture has abandoned. Chicken a la king and puff pastry was another little nugget of French culture and cuisine that served us pretty well. So the idea here this time was to stuff creamy chicken and mushrooms into one single pastry, and there would be lots of these individual pastries, each stuffed to the brim. By now, we're talking about somewhere along the 70s. America's always been a big fan of cream. There's really no denying that, but I would say that we've warmed up to mushrooms a lot more than we used to. I don't think they were not popular, but they weren't exactly a standout ingredient that would be making anyone's top 10 or top 5 either. Americans were changing their palates regarding mushrooms thanks to two things, though. One, they had built up a fondness for it thanks to how many Americans, especially ones living on the edges of urban hubs, relied on foraging wild mushrooms. Two, things like cream soups, such as cream of mushroom soups, were already making the pairing of cream and mushrooms popular. This take on puff pastry wasn't exactly a long shot, since the stage was pretty much mostly set. However, I think most people have opted for things like sandwiches and ordering takeout at lunch now, or just getting a coffee. Work culture's really changed, and having a full-fledged meal during your 15-minute break isn't the most appealing option to a lot of people nowadays. Sloppy Joe. Biscuit Pies took a beloved sandwich and gave it a playful twist perfect for busy families. Instead of spooning the saucy ground beef mixture onto plain buns, home cooks tucked it inside fluffy biscuit dough and baked until golden brown. The result was a handheld pocket that stayed warm and delicious, making it easy to serve at weeknight dinners or pack for school lunches the next day. The tangy tomato sauce soaked into the tender biscuit, creating a flavor that felt both familiar and new. Kids adored the fun of breaking into their own little pie, and parents liked how neatly it contained the usual mess of a sloppy Joe. This recipe reflected the decade's growing love for convenient finger foods and clever shortcuts without losing the heart of a home-cooked meal. It was budget-friendly, adaptable with vegetables or cheese, and a sure way to bring smiles to the table when everyone needed comfort after a long day. Broccoli rice casserole was a favorite in the 70s when canned soups were a staple in every kitchen. This dish combined rice, broccoli florets, cream of mushroom soup, and a layer of melted cheese baked on top. It was hearty, creamy, and filling, perfect for serving a family on a budget. The broccoli made it seem healthy, even though the richness of the soup and cheese turned it into indulgence. It became a holiday favorite, appearing at Thanksgiving or Christmas as the green side dish everyone expected. Children often learned to eat broccoli for the first time through this casserole, thanks to the cheesy topping. It was easy to prepare ahead and pop in the oven, making it ideal for busy households. Broccoli rice casserole represented the convenience cooking of the era, where canned goods and casseroles ruled the table. Though it has faded, it remains one of the iconic forgotten side dishes no one makes anymore. Swiss steak turned tough, inexpensive cuts of beef into fork-tender meals through patient braising in tomato sauce with onions and peppers. The technique, pounding flour into the meat before browning, tenderized the fibers while the long, slow cooking broke down connective tissue into silky richness. Working-class families bought round steak, pounded it mercilessly, and trusted time to work its magic. The dish simmered for hours, filling homes with an aroma that drew children asking when dinner would be ready. Served over egg noodles, rice, or mashed potatoes, Swiss steak stretched modest cuts into meals that satisfied the hungriest appetites. The tomato gravy, enriched by meat juices and softened vegetables, was often the best part, sopped up with bread until plates gleamed clean. Factory cafeterias and school lunchrooms featured Swiss steak on weekly rotations. This economical classic has largely disappeared, replaced by faster cooking methods that cannot replicate its slow-cooked tenderness. Mock apple pie with Ritz crackers is the kind of recipe that sounds like a joke until you try it. This Depression-era dessert was born when apples were either too expensive or too hard to come by, but families still wanted something sweet to finish off the day. Enter the Ritz cracker, a salty, buttery, flaky little miracle that, when soaked in sugar syrup and lemon juice, somehow started to taste like baked apples. Cookbooks from the 1930s described the recipe as appleless apple pie, and you could find it in community recipe cards all the way through the 1970s. The crackers were layered inside a crust and spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg. The filling baked down into a warm, sticky, and surprisingly convincing substitute for the real thing. If someone didn't tell you, you probably would never know. What made this dish so genius was how it turned an ordinary pantry staple into a dessert that felt luxurious in a time when luxuries were few and far between. People would gather around the table, pass around the pie, and pretend it was made with fresh-picked fruit from a local orchard, and honestly, most didn't mind the difference one bit. Cabbage and tomato skillet was what you made when there was nothing left to make. Ground beef, shredded cabbage, canned tomatoes, and onion, fried together until the house smelled like survival. It was not elegant, but it was honest. Every spoonful delivered the bite of pepper and the sweetness of cooked-down cabbage, proof that even a few cheap ingredients could become a family's dinner. This was the food of mill towns, tenant farms, and one-room apartments where every penny mattered. It cooked fast, served plenty, and left almost nothing to clean up, a working mother's blessing. The color alone was cheerful, red and green against the gray of winter. And though no one wrote down the recipe, everyone remembered it. The cabbage and tomato skillet was not about perfection, it was about endurance, the kind that fed both hunger and hope. Barbecue meatballs were small, flavorful morsels coated in tangy barbecue sauce that made them a popular choice for 1950s church gatherings. These meatballs were typically made from ground beef or pork mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and seasonings, then baked or fried before being simmered or tossed in barbecue sauce. Served warm and often with toothpicks, they were easy to eat while socializing and required no utensils. Their rich, smoky flavor and sticky glaze appealed to a wide audience and added a bit of hearty indulgence to potluck tables. Barbecue meatballs were practical for feeding large groups because they could be made in batches and kept warm in slow cookers or chafing dishes. They showcased the mid-century love for barbecue flavors while adapting well to the communal and casual nature of church dinners. Their popularity endured because they combined familiar comfort food with convenient presentation, making them a cherished recipe from the era. Creamy carrot and orange soup was the kind of dish that felt like sunshine in a bowl. Bright, citrusy, and just sweet enough, it took spring carrots and gave them a new voice. Blended with fresh orange juice and just enough cream to smooth the edges, it was bold without being overpowering. This was not your average soup. It was light, fresh, and zippy. Served warm or even slightly chilled, it made you rethink what soup could be. In the 1970s, it was the kind of thing your aunt with the macrame plant hangers and avocado green kitchen would serve at a ladies' luncheon. It came in shallow bowls with parsley leaves on top, and it was always met with polite surprise, then actual delight. It broke the rules. Soup was not supposed to be orange like a popsicle or smell faintly of fruit. And yet here it was, stealing the spotlight in the middle of April. Today, we cling to potato soup and chicken broth. But this one deserves a comeback. It was bold, it was pretty, and it reminded everyone that food could be both beautiful and brave, even if it only came around when the daffodils did. Leftover pie for breakfast was once common enough that nobody batted an eye. In the 1950s, when dessert pies were baked at home regularly, there was often a slice or two left on the counter by morning. Instead of wasting it, people happily ate it cold with coffee or milk. A slice of apple pie or pumpkin pie was filling, quick, and made mornings feel special even when money was tight. Kids loved it because it blurred the line between breakfast and treat, while adults saw it as practical since it used up leftovers. It was especially common after holidays when kitchens overflowed with pies, but the tradition stretched into everyday life as well. At a time before strict rules about healthy breakfasts, pie was just another way to start the day. Even workmen heading out early might grab a wedge on the way to the job, knowing it would keep them full until lunch. It was not about indulgence as much as it was about convenience and resourcefulness. Today, the idea seems strange, but back then it was normal. Leftover pie for breakfast was proof that sometimes the quickest solution was also the most satisfying. Creamed peas on toast were a very simple and inexpensive meal that helped many people get through the day in the 1960s, especially throughout rural America. Peas were man's best friend because of how abundant they were. You could also throw them on top of anything for a better crunch and flavor, or you could just make breakfast meals out of them like this. The 1960s were seen as a transitional period for the culinary world in America. Processed convenience foods were slowly starting to dominate, but working-class homes were going to feel the change later than others. They were still relying on home-cooked meals that had been passed down from family to family. That's pretty much how it would work in a lot of rural areas. People would find out a great idea, record it, pass it down to their kids. Sometimes that would be ways to farm or maintain the home, and other times it would be how to have a breakfast that saves you money. A can of peas cost just a few cents, and it did the job better than anything else if you didn't have beans on hand, so why not? I mean, it's a lot better than just toast. Neck bones and rice was the kind of meal that took hours to make and only minutes to disappear. Pork neck bones, tough and sinewy at first, were slow cooked until the meat fell off the bone, swimming in a broth that was deep, smoky, and spiced just right. That broth soaked right into the rice, making every bite rich and sticky with flavor. This was not a dish you rushed. You had to babysit the pot, stir it, taste it, let it tell you when it was ready. But once it was, it fed a whole family and then some. It was the kind of meal that made kids run in from outside when they smelled it through the screen door. Today, though, neck bones are harder to find and even harder to sell. People want quick meals, boneless cuts, and instant flavor. But back in the day, the bones held the taste. They were the secret ingredient. And speaking of flavor that was once treasured but now too often tossed aside, the next dish brought both nutrition and nostalgia to the plate. Beef and peanut stew was a Southern-inspired dish that revealed the influence of African flavors on American cooking. Ground beef was simmered slowly with onions, tomatoes, and a broth thickened by peanut paste, creating a rich and deeply satisfying stew. The peanuts gave the dish both protein and creaminess, turning modest ingredients into something hearty and flavorful. Families often served it with rice or cornbread, which made it stretch even further for large households. This was a meal born from resourcefulness, using affordable staples to create depth and nourishment. It was also a reflection of cultural blending, as peanuts had long been grown in the South and found their way into inventive recipes during lean years. For grandparents, this stew was remembered not just for its taste, but for how it embodied both tradition and survival, linking communities through shared flavors and kitchen ingenuity. Ramps and eggs were spring's homecoming song in the hills. Ramps, those wild mountain onions with a kick sharp enough to make your eyes water, came up when winter loosened its grip. Folks foraged them along shady slopes, carrying bunches home like treasure. Fried in bacon grease, they turned golden and fragrant, and when you cracked eggs over them, the skillet became a celebration of survival. After months of salted meats and dried beans, this meal tasted alive again. The air filled with that pungent scent only mountain people could love. It was quick to make, rich in flavor, and a sure sign that better weather had arrived. Ramps and eggs reminded everyone that the land still provided if you knew where to look. That first bite after the thaw was like breathing again, spicy, hearty, and filled with gratitude for another season of life in the Appalachian Hills. Onion skins for dyeing Easter eggs produced colors that store-bought tablets could never match: deep amber, rusty brown, and burnished gold that looked like treasures. Grandma saved yellow and brown skins for weeks before Easter, stuffing them into paper bags. Eggs wrapped in those papery skins, secured with rubber bands, then simmered gently in water with vinegar to help color adhere. Results were stunning natural marbling effects, each egg emerging unique. Some grandmothers pressed small leaves against shells before wrapping, creating botanical prints impossibly delicate. Red onion skins produced lavender tones while yellow created deep golds. This connected families to centuries of tradition when synthetic dyes didn't exist. The eggs were completely safe since onion skins were food grade. Children gathered watching eggs transform, learning patience and appreciating beauty from simple natural sources. So far, we have two solid options for salads with a sandwich variation for one of them, but what if you do not like protein in your salads? Want them on the sweeter, more dessert-y side? Then molded cranberry orange salads have your name written on them wrapped up in a bow. Some normal or raspberry gelatin and frozen cranberries, plus apples and oranges cut into wedges, would make for an incredibly sweet and delightful salad that had everything you wanted in it taste-wise. It also did wonders for your skin with a steady supply of vitamins and the benefits of cranberries. So not only would grandmothers make this for their beloved families, but they would sneak a bowl on the side for themselves too. Despite the ingredients being relatively easy to get, this was more of an upper-class dish popular in affluent areas. Stuffed shells with ricotta and spinach offered a hearty Italian-American comfort that felt festive enough for company, yet simple enough for a Monday night. Oversized pasta shells were boiled just until tender, then filled with a creamy mixture of ricotta cheese, chopped spinach, garlic, and herbs, before being nestled in bubbling tomato sauce. Families loved arranging the shells like little boats in a baking dish, sprinkling them generously with mozzarella, and watching the cheese melt into golden strands. The aroma of garlic and basil filled every corner of the house, drawing everyone to the kitchen. This dish balanced thrift and indulgence, stretching a modest amount of cheese and greens into a meal that could feed a crowd. In the 1980s, when Italian flavors were becoming everyday staples, stuffed shells offered a homemade alternative to restaurant dining that felt just as satisfying. It was a dish that invited conversation and second helpings, a perfect example of how simple ingredients created enduring family memories. Congealed lime salad was one of those quirky mid-century creations that blended sweet and savory into something unusual but beloved. It started with lime gelatin, bright and wobbly, then mixed with cream cheese, crushed pineapple, and chopped walnuts. The result was a pastel green mold that appeared on holiday buffets, church potlucks, and even wedding receptions. The tart lime balanced with the creaminess of cheese, while the pineapple added a sweet burst and the walnuts gave a little crunch. It was always set in decorative molds, which turned it into a centerpiece as much as a side dish. Children loved poking it, while adults appreciated the novelty of it being both salad and dessert. Congealed lime salad reflected the experimental spirit of kitchens in the 60s and 70s, when gelatin was the base for all sorts of imaginative recipes. Though many now smile at its oddity, it was once cherished for its creativity and the joy it brought to the table. Ham and bean soup represented the ultimate expression of blue-collar thrift, transforming leftover ham bones into thick, nourishing soup that could feed a family for days. After Sunday ham dinners, the bone with its clinging bits of meat went into a large pot with dried navy beans, onions, celery, and water. The soup simmered for hours until the beans broke down into creaminess and the ham fell from the bone in tender shreds. The resulting broth was rich with smoky pork flavor, thick enough that a spoon could almost stand in it. Working families knew that a good ham bone was never wasted. It was the beginning of another meal entirely. Children came home to find the soup warming on the stove, served with thick slices of buttered bread or crackers crumbled directly into their bowls. The soup tasted even better the second day when flavors had melded overnight. This kind of practical cooking has largely disappeared as fewer families buy bone-in hams or take the time for slow simmering. Oatmeal meatloaf binder might not sound glamorous, but it was one of the most dependable cooking tricks of the era. When breadcrumbs were in short supply or when a cook just needed something heartier, rolled oats stepped up to the plate. Mixed into ground beef or pork with eggs and spices, oats gave structure to meatloaf, absorbed flavor, and made every bite stretch just a little farther. They were cheap, shelf-stable, and widely available, even during hard times. And unlike bread, they didn't dry out the mixture. Instead, they kept everything moist while adding fiber and body. Depression-era and wartime cookbooks praised oatmeal not only for its price but for its versatility, showing up in main courses as often as in breakfast. Some recipes even suggested soaking the oats in milk before mixing them in for an extra soft texture. For big families trying to feed everyone on a budget, swapping breadcrumbs for oats became second nature. No one cared that it wasn't gourmet. They were just glad to have a warm, filling slice of something savory. And with ketchup on top and mashed potatoes on the side, meatloaf night became a cozy, familiar ritual in homes across the country. Beef and barley stew was built to last. One pot, one slow flame, and enough time to let the world outside freeze while the inside stayed warm. Ground beef browned first, then onions, carrots, barley, and water joined in. Nothing fancy, everything needed. As it simmered for hours, it thickened into a meal you could eat with a spoon or fork. The barley swelled, the cabbage softened, and the beef melted into the broth, turning a few scraps into something that tasted like plenty. It was food that nourished from the inside out, stretching a pound of meat across 3 days if it had to. Every kitchen had its version. More vegetables if the garden was kind, more water if times were lean. It was the taste of patience, of gratitude, and of winter's quiet victories. Corn pudding with creamed corn was a smooth and sweet casserole that often appeared as a comforting side dish during 1950s church potlucks. This pudding combined creamed corn with eggs, milk, sugar, and sometimes butter or flour, baked until set and golden on top. Its creamy texture and mild sweetness made it a perfect complement to savory mains, adding a gentle richness to the meal. Corn pudding was appreciated for its simplicity and ability to stretch a small amount of corn into a satisfying dish for many guests. It was a practical recipe that could be prepared ahead and baked at the potluck location or brought ready to serve. The dish reflected the era's fondness for casseroles that combined convenience with homey flavors. It was particularly popular in regions where corn was a dietary staple and represented the comfort of familiar, unpretentious cooking shared among church families. Ham and pea creamed pasta was the quiet superstar of post-Easter evenings. You took the leftover ham, diced it into cubes, and stirred it into a pan with sweet green peas and a splash of cream. The noodles were never fancy, egg noodles or wide ribbons, but they soaked up the sauce like they were made for it. It was not a heavy meal. It was not supposed to be. It was a spring supper, meant to feel light after a long Sunday of glazes and gravies. This dish was comfort in its gentlest form. The kind of thing you could eat in front of the television, feet tucked under you, watching a rerun with the windows open. The breeze smelled like lilac and fresh-cut grass. You could almost taste it between bites. It was not meant to impress guests. It was meant to stretch what was left, turn a holiday into a few more quiet moments of flavor. Today, it barely shows up in cookbooks. but ask anyone who grew up in a 1970s kitchen, and they will remember the way the cream clung to the ham, the way the peas popped when you bit into them. It was spring, and it was good. Shredded wheat with warm milk was the original convenience breakfast before sugary cereals came along. Large wheat biscuits, plain and unflavored, were placed in a bowl and doused with steaming milk until they softened. The result was hearty, filling, and simple, a far cry from the frosted cereals that would later dominate grocery aisles. Parents liked it because it had no frills but plenty of nutrition, and children ate it because it was what was served. Shredded wheat kept for ages in the pantry, making it reliable for mornings when fresh bread or eggs were scarce. The warmth of the milk softened the dense biscuits, turning them into a porridge-like meal within minutes. It was especially comforting in winter when kitchens were cold and families needed something hearty before heading out. Generations grew up with shredded wheat as their daily start, long before colorful mascots made cereal exciting. Though plain, it carried the kind of comfort that lingers in memory, tied to mornings spent at the family table. Today, it has mostly been forgotten, replaced by sugary options that promise more excitement but less nourishment. Still, it was once the backbone of quick American breakfasts. Foraged mushrooms didn't always lining our burgers and topping our pizzas. For a majority of its history, it was really just something people ate when things were super bad. There was nothing to eat and people basically just had to forage for whatever they could. The most popular of this was the button mushroom, but they definitely tried to forage as much as they could. Now, despite this, mushrooms were still considered really low class. People had just begun to associate it with nothing but poverty and hard times. It wasn't until the middle and the later end of the 20th century that mushrooms started to become a classic topping you'd see on not just burgers and pizzas, but steaks, chicken dishes, sandwiches, and all kinds of soups and stews. Basically, it's a mushroom world, and we're just living in it now. A big part of this is how canned mushrooms became so accessible. Another reason is that an interest in European cuisine led to a massive boom in cream of soups and cream of mushroom soups. Share some of your favorite mushrooms with us right now in the comments. Potatoes weren't the only option. They were great, but not the only ones. There is nothing tidy about a sloppy Joe, and that is the whole point. These school cafeteria icons had one mission: to hit like a flavor bomb and leave a trail behind. Tangy ground beef cooked with tomato paste, onions, and whatever seasoning the lunch lady felt like using that day. Scooped in a steaming pile onto soft hamburger buns that were usually a little too small. You would take one bite, and the filling would slide out the other side like it was trying to escape. Your hands? Covered. Your tray? A disaster. Your smile? Huge. They were sweet, salty, savory, and just chaotic enough to make lunch feel like a party. Even the name sounded like something you should not be allowed to say in class. Sloppy Joes were not reserved for fancy moments. They were served with plastic forks and half a chocolate milk carton. But they became legendary. Maybe it was because they tasted like comfort food mixed with rebellion. Or maybe it was just the fact that no one ever got through one without needing extra napkins. Either way, it earned its place in the Sandwich Hall of Fame. But what if I told you there was a sandwich out there that combined egg, gravy, and a hamburger bun, and somehow made it work? Beef and apple casserole was a farm kitchen classic that combined savory and sweet in a way that might surprise modern cooks. Ground beef was browned with onions and then layered with sliced apples, which softened during baking to add a subtle sweetness. This combination reflected the practical mindset of farm families, who used what they had on hand from both field and orchard. Apples were plentiful in many regions, and pairing them with beef made a dish that was nourishing, filling, and thrifty. The casserole was simple to prepare, and once baked, it brought together flavors that balanced the hearty with the refreshing. Families often remembered it as a dish that made ordinary nights feel comforting, and grandparents recalled how the aroma of beef and apples baking filled the house. It was not fancy food, but it carried with it the taste of homegrown practicality and the creativity needed to stretch every meal in hard times. Rabbit and dumplings was a meal that tasted like effort and reward mixed together, the kind that carried the story of the hunt straight to the supper table. Catching the rabbit was only half the work. The rest was done slow and steady in the kitchen. The meat was browned, simmered in broth until tender, and dropped into bubbling stock where floury dumplings waited to soak up every drop of flavor. Steam fogged the windows while the smell drifted through the house, wrapping around everyone like a promise of comfort. It was gamey, rich, and deeply satisfying, an old-world supper that turned survival into celebration. Every bite reminded folks that food earned by hand carried a different kind of pride. Families would sit quiet except for the clink of spoons and soft hums of contentment. Rabbit and dumplings filled bellies and hearts alike, warming even the coldest nights. It was country comfort at its finest, built from grit, gratitude, and a little wild luck. In mountain homes, it stood as proof that patience and hard work always paid off. The meal may have been humble, but the feeling it brought was priceless. Home, warmth, and a kind of joy you could only taste. Cast iron seasoning secrets were guarded knowledge that grandmothers demonstrated through decades of daily cooking rather than explaining outright. Those black skillets, passed down through generations, developed surfaces so slick that eggs slid around without a drop of oil needed. Grandma never used soap on her cast iron, just hot water, a stiff brush, and immediate drying over a warm burner to prevent rust. After every use, she rubbed a thin layer of lard across the entire surface while still warm, building layers of polymerized fat that created natural nonstick protection better than any factory coating. She knew acidic foods could strip seasoning and cook tomatoes elsewhere. She understood slow heating prevented warping. These skillets outlasted every fancy coated pan store's sell, working better each passing year. The tragedy is how many perfectly seasoned pieces sit neglected in estate sales because new generations never learned their proper care. When life hands you a cow but almost nothing else, you cook the cow's brains. Fried cow brains, or calf's brains, if you want to sound a bit more gourmet, was a Dust Bowl specialty not because people wanted to eat it, but because they had to. They were not fastidious in the past. When you had to fight for your life, you ate everything that was on the animal. Now I know that fried cow brains may sound like something that shouldn't even be considered food, let alone something that might be considered delicious. For this dish, brains were washed in water or milk, dredged in flour, and fried until brown and crispy. Consider them as the first-generation chicken nuggets, if chicken nuggets had a soft core and came with a helping of angst. The flavor? It was mild, almost buttery, and that was the reason why nobody fled from the dish when somebody served it. Cow brains fried were dense in nutrients, especially protein, and thus a good meal during famine. While nowadays people might shudder at the thought of consuming brains, in the past, it was simply Tuesday's supper. And hey, if you put some gravy on top, it might just seem like you're eating gourmet food. Spinach and bacon quiche became a national craze as brunch culture boomed in the early 1980s, and families happily carried the trend into their dinner routines. A buttery crust held a custard of eggs, cream, smoky bacon, and tender spinach leaves, baking into a rich pie that sliced beautifully for both casual and elegant meals. The contrast of salty bacon and earthy greens gave every bite a layered flavor that felt grown-up yet comforting. Busy parents loved that it could be assembled in advance and baked when everyone came home, while children enjoyed the silky texture and savory aroma wafting from the oven. It paired easily with a simple salad or even a cup of soup, making it a flexible centerpiece for weeknights or weekend guests. Quiche represented a shift toward continental sophistication in American cooking, and this particular version showed that vegetables and rich cream could coexist in perfect harmony. It became a reliable dinner star before quietly fading from most household menus. Corn pudding was once the pride of holiday tables, a creamy custard baked from fresh or canned corn mixed with eggs, milk, and a touch of sugar. It was sweet, savory, and comforting, bridging the gap between a vegetable and a dessert. Families served it at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Sunday dinners, where it became a symbol of warmth and tradition. The top baked into a golden crust, while the inside stayed soft and custardy, almost like spoon bread. It was a side dish that felt special, even though it used the simplest of ingredients. Generations grew up with corn pudding as a reminder of festive meals shared together. It was easy to make, but always impressive, showing the magic of turning corn into something extraordinary. Today, it has slipped from holiday spreads, but its memory lingers in cookbooks and in the stories of those who once scooped it proudly at family gatherings. Hot beef sandwiches were the ultimate blue-collar comfort food, served steaming on thick slices of white bread piled high with tender roast beef and smothered in rich brown gravy. Factory workers across the Midwest ordered these at lunch counters, knowing a single plate could fuel them through the afternoon shift. The bread absorbed the gravy until it practically melted in your mouth, while the beef, often from cheaper end cuts, slow roasted until tender, provided the protein working men needed. Mashed potatoes served alongside created a complete meal costing less than $1. Short-order cooks kept gravy boats ready, knowing the lunch rush would bring waves of men in work boots looking for something hot and filling. The beauty was its honesty. No fancy seasonings, just good meat, good bread, and plenty of gravy to hold it together. This diner classic has nearly vanished from lunch counters, replaced by faster foods that lack its soul-warming satisfaction. Cabbage stretch soup was more than just a recipe. It was a lifeline in a pot. In times when meat was rare and vegetables limited, cabbage became the star of the soup pot. Shredded thin and simmered with water, onion, and maybe a little broth if you were lucky, it created a warm, hearty base that could feed a family for pennies. Sometimes potatoes, carrots, or bits of pasta were added to bulk it up, but cabbage was always the anchor. It had the advantage of being cheap, easy to grow, and surprisingly filling. The best part? You didn't need much else. The longer it cooked, the sweeter and more tender it became, soaking up any seasoning you threw its way. Old cookbooks and wartime manuals often included cabbage soup under sustaining meals, or meatless mains, emphasizing its value for both health and economy. Some versions were inspired by European immigrants who had long relied on cabbage in their home cooking. It's not fancy. It doesn't pretend to be. But cabbage soup meant something back then. It meant warmth on cold nights, a meal that could stretch to feed everyone, and the quiet triumph of making something out of almost nothing. Ground beef and potato hash was the week's final meal. Everything left over fried together until golden and good. Cold potatoes were diced, onions chopped, and ground beef stirred in, sizzling in bacon grease until the edges crisped. The sound alone could make a kitchen feel alive again. It was working people's food, simple and sustaining. The kind of meal that made no apologies for being plain because it did not have to. Served hot from cast iron, it was eaten with ketchup, pickles, or whatever condiment the cupboard still had. In some homes, an egg might crown the top, a small luxury that made it feel like something more. Families called it hash, but it was really a story of thrift, of making beauty from what remained. Every bite carried the smoky taste of labor and care, the warmth of food cooked slow and shared fast. Spring vegetable medley over rice was the kind of thing that showed up when the garden woke up before you did. The colors on the plate were unmistakable. Bright orange carrots, green snap peas, pale zucchini, soft asparagus spears. Lightly steamed, never overcooked, they were dressed in a buttery lemon sauce that smelled like Sunday. Poured over a scoop of white rice, the whole thing looked like a still life painting from a 1970s cookbook. This was not the centerpiece of dinner, but it did not need to be. It was the taste of the season itself. In those days, no one talked about plant-based diets or vegetarian eating. It was just called using what you had. Spring meals meant fewer cans and more chopping. More butter, less cheese, more flavor, fewer rules. Today, the medley has been replaced with frozen bags of mixed vegetables that never quite taste right. But this dish had patience. It had texture. It had timing. And when you got it right, just enough crunch, just enough lemon, it made you feel like you had stepped outside, even if you were still in your kitchen. It was a quiet kind of joy, the kind that only came once a year. Cottage cheese on toast with jam might sound unusual today, but it was once seen as a healthy and filling option. A slice of toast would be spread with cottage cheese for protein, then topped with a spoonful of jam for sweetness. It balanced savory and sweet in a way that appealed to both adults and children. For households watching their budget, cottage cheese was affordable and versatile, often purchased in large tubs that needed to be used up quickly. This made it a logical choice for mornings when eggs or meat were too expensive or unavailable. The jam added color and flavor, often homemade from backyard fruit or bought cheaply at the market. Together, it was a 5-minute breakfast that felt modern and sensible at the time. People praised it for being light, yet satisfying, and it became a regular in cookbooks that promoted practical eating. Over the years, cottage cheese lost its popularity, but at the time it symbolized a balanced breakfast. Forgotten now, it remains a reminder that simplicity can taste just as good as more elaborate meals. Quick, frugal, and wholesome, it was the kind of breakfast that worked for everyone. Cabbage and bacon fry-up was something people adored for its simplicity and its affordability. It was a hearty meal you would frequently see on dinner tables throughout the 1960s if you weren't already tired of seeing it everywhere in cookbooks. It was very common to see this in Appalachia and the South, because cabbage was especially cheap there. Bacon was something the entire nation had a deep-found appreciation for, but the South was always one step ahead in all things savory. The dish was supposed to be a main course meal with a side. This would usually be cornbread or potatoes, but if you were working with lower quantities, then this dish could also do great as a side dish. Cabbage was one of the most affordable vegetables on the entire market, and it was not seasonal. Back then, refrigeration had not become a countrywide phenomena that everyone could rely on 24/7 like we do. We have our fridges on all the time, you know? And cabbage was one of those kinds of vegetables that could last for weeks and weeks without any kind of refrigeration. It was really quick and easy, it was flexible, and you could even try all kinds of different spices and toppings like ranch dressing to make it even better. Resourcefulness has always been a defining trait of home cooking, and few dishes exemplify that better than bologna cups. A simple yet inventive creation, this dish transformed a humble slice of bologna into an edible vessel filled with mashed potatoes, eggs, or even creamed vegetables. What started as a budget-friendly meal quickly became a quirky favorite in American kitchens during the 1970s. Bologna had long been a staple of frugal cooking, especially in post-war America when processed meats were widely available and inexpensive. By the time the 70s rolled around, bologna wasn't just for sandwiches anymore. It was being fried, stuffed, and repurposed in ways that made it feel like something more than just a lunchbox filler. Fried bologna was already a Southern tradition, but shaping it into crispy golden cups took it to another level, offering both texture and versatility. Some variations used scrambled eggs for a breakfast twist, while others turned them into bite-sized appetizers, topped with cheese or a dollop of mustard. Modern adaptations have seen bologna cups reimagined with gourmet fillings, but their original charm remains. Proof that sometimes the best ideas come from making the most of what's already in the fridge. Hamburger mulligan stew was not just food, it was survival in a pot during the Depression years when families did what they could with what little they had. Ground beef was often stretched with canned vegetables, potatoes, and sometimes beans to make the pot go further. This stew was a hobo classic, thrown together on train tracks, in shanty towns, and later in regular kitchens where mothers knew that filling stomachs mattered more than presentation. The dish reflected a spirit of sharing since anyone could toss in what they had, and together it became a meal. The broth was thin, but the variety of vegetables made it hearty enough to leave people satisfied, especially on cold nights when resources were scarce. It might not have been glamorous, but it kept bellies full and lifted spirits with its warmth. Many grandparents remembered the stew as a symbol of togetherness, teaching that pooling what you had could turn scraps into something meaningful. Soup bone and potato hash was what happened when thrift met hunger. After a long week, that old soup bone still had work to do. It went back into the pot for one more boil, drawing out every ounce of flavor left in it. Then you would toss in diced potatoes, onions, maybe a carrot if you were lucky, and fry it all together until crisp. The smell filled the kitchen with promise, even when there was not much else to eat. Mountain cooking was about stretching what you had until it could not stretch anymore. This hash tasted smoky, salty, and satisfying. Nothing fancy, just real food made by real hands. Families knew that wasting even a scrap was a sin against hard work. Soup bone and potato hash proved that resourcefulness could taste every bit as good as abundance when cooked with patience and pride. A pinch of salt in coffee was Grandma's answer to bitter brews that made faces pucker and stomachs clench. She didn't add sugar to mask bad coffee. She prevented bitterness with a few grains of salt added to grounds before percolating. Salt ions blocked taste receptors perceiving bitterness, allowing coffee's natural sweetness and complexity to shine. This worked especially well with cheaper blends and older beans that lost freshness, turning mediocre coffee into something smooth. During the Depression, when families couldn't afford quality beans, this trick made every pot palatable without expensive cream or sugar. Grandma added salt so instinctively she never measured. Just a pinch between fingers dropped into the basket. Visitors commented on how smooth her coffee tasted, never guessing the secret in the salt shaker. Modern baristas rediscovered this technique, but for decades it lived only in Grandmother's muscle memory. Who says you need apples to make an apple pie? Not the Depression era, folks, that's for sure. This mock apple pie was a genius hack that used Ritz crackers as the crust and a sweet, sticky filling made from sugar, cinnamon, and water. It was a budget-friendly dessert that satisfied the sweet tooth without the need for expensive or hard-to-find ingredients. Plus, it was a great way to use up those stale crackers lurking in the back of your pantry. The Ritz mock apple pie became a Depression-era favorite, despite the fact that it was a pastry imposter. How did it work? The aromatic mixture of sugar, cinnamon, butter, lemon juice, and crackers combined to convince the taster's senses that the pie actually tasted of apples. Mock apple pie actually dates to the mid-1800s. During the wintertime, when apples were scarce and dried apple stores were used up, inventive home cooks would instead use soda crackers or stale bread. The more modern Ritz cracker version came about in the 1930s. Honey mustard glazed pork chops brought sweet and tangy excitement to dinner tables that were often tired of plain meat and potatoes. Home cooks whisked together mustard, honey, and a splash of vinegar to create a golden glaze that clung to thick chops as they seared in a hot skillet. The sauce caramelized under the broiler, forming a sticky crust that released a mouth-watering aroma as soon as the oven door opened. This recipe required only a few pantry staples and a quick 30 minutes, making it a lifesaver for busy weeknights. Children loved the gentle sweetness, while adults appreciated the lively bite of mustard, a combination that felt sophisticated without being fussy. In the 1980s, when flavored mustards and gourmet condiments were suddenly everywhere in grocery stores, this dish captured the spirit of culinary experimentation. Served with roasted vegetables or buttered egg noodles, these pork chops turned an ordinary evening into something that felt a little special, proving that creativity could thrive even in simple family kitchens. Tomato aspic was a dish that baffled outsiders but was once a proud part of American dining. Made by mixing tomato juice, gelatin, spices, and sometimes vegetables, it was poured into molds and chilled until firm. The result was a savory, wobbly creation served in slices like salad. Families often brought it out for holidays, where its bright red color looked festive on the table. It was tangy, spicy, and refreshing, often paired with lettuce or cottage cheese. Housewives loved it because it was inexpensive, kept well in the refrigerator, and could be prepared ahead of time. Children might have turned up their noses, but adults appreciated its unique flavor and presentation. Tomato aspic may seem strange today, but in the 1960s and 1970s, it was a sign of sophistication, showing how adventurous cooks could be with gelatin. Johnny Marzetti was the casserole that fed church potlucks, union halls, and family reunions across Ohio and the Midwest throughout the 1970s. Named after a Columbus restaurant owner, this hearty combination layered ground beef, tomato sauce, onions, and egg noodles with generous amounts of melted cheese on top. The dish was designed for feeding crowds. A single pan could serve a dozen hungry workers. Women passed recipes between friends, each adding personal touches like mushrooms, peppers, or extra garlic. The noodles absorbed the meaty sauce while baking, creating a texture that was neither soupy nor dry, but perfectly saucy. Factory workers would find covered dishes waiting after long shifts, ready to be reheated. The casserole traveled well, held its heat, and satisfied appetites that sandwiches could not touch. Though it originated decades earlier, the 1970s saw Johnny Marzetti at its peak popularity before slowly fading from community cookbooks. Eggless mayonnaise substitute was a lifesaver when rationing hit hard and eggs disappeared from pantry shelves. Homemakers got creative, crafting sandwich spreads and dressings without a single yolk. The secret was evaporated milk, mixed with vinegar or lemon juice, mustard, and a touch of oil. The acid thickened the milk into something creamy and tangy, surprisingly close to the real deal. This makeshift mayo showed up in potato salads, slaws, sandwiches, and deviled egg imposters alike. Wartime cookbooks often included multiple versions, each with different ratios or seasonings, depending on what was available. Some added sugar or paprika, while others leaned savory with onion powder and garlic. It wasn't about perfect replication. It was about good enough flavor when options were scarce. This DIY condiment not only stretched your supplies, but also kept familiar dishes on the table, boosting morale when meals were otherwise bare bones. And for families trying to create something resembling a normal lunch, that made all the difference. It's one of those small, clever tricks that helped people hold on to their routines and their dignity when the world around them was anything but predictable. Ground beef and turnip hash was born in farmhouse kitchens, where turnips were as plentiful as potatoes and just as important. When meat was scarce, women would dice the turnips fine, brown them with onions, and stir in a bit of ground beef for flavor. The turnips softened but kept a slight bite, their peppery taste blending beautifully with the savory meat. Everything cooked together in a skillet until golden and fragrant. It was the taste of thrift, of stretching what the land gave until it lasted through winter. Served hot with a fried egg or a slice of bread, it was a meal that required little but gave plenty. Farmers came in from the fields to eat it, grateful for its warmth and weight. It was not fancy, but it carried the flavor of resilience, the reminder that the simplest foods are often the most honest. Cheese and pineapple skewers were a popular appetizer that combined sweet and savory flavors in a bite-sized form. These skewers typically featured cubes of sharp cheddar cheese paired with juicy chunks of pineapple threaded onto toothpicks or small wooden sticks. The contrast between the tangy cheese and the tropical sweetness of the pineapple made for an appealing taste experience that was easy to enjoy while mingling at potluck socials. This simple yet elegant dish was quick to prepare and transport, making it a favorite among church members tasked with bringing something festive and shareable. The bright colors of the golden pineapple and pale cheese also added a cheerful touch to the food table, helping to create a welcoming atmosphere. Many cooks used canned pineapple for convenience, especially during winter months when fresh fruit was less available. Despite its simplicity, cheese and pineapple skewers represented the kind of thoughtful, crowd-pleasing dishes that helped build community spirit in mid-century church gatherings. Their popularity endured because they required minimal effort but delivered maximum enjoyment to guests. Chicken salad with grapes and walnuts sat proudly on every picnic table blanket. It was a dish built for Tupperware, for pastel-colored bowls with matching lids, and for sunny weekends with folding chairs and paper napkins. Chopped chicken met halved grapes, celery crunch, and the buttery bite of toasted walnuts. A dollop of mayonnaise pulled it all together, sometimes with a hint of lemon or a dash of dill. It was cool, creamy, and surprisingly refreshing under the spring sun. It felt fancy, even if it was simple. And that is what made it special. Served on a croissant, it became brunch-worthy. Served on a lettuce leaf, it looked like something from a women's magazine. But even when it was scooped onto a plain sandwich roll, it still carried that air of grown-up elegance. It belonged to an era when spring meals were lighter, fresher, and carefully packed in plaid-lined picnic baskets. Today, the grapes have been swapped out, the walnuts forgotten, and the whole idea pushed aside for pre-packaged substitutes. But there was a time when this dish meant spring had truly arrived, and biting into it felt like a reward for making it through winter. Toast with apple butter was once a farmhouse staple that carried the warmth of autumn into cold mornings. Bread, often baked the day before, would be toasted on a skillet or under a broiler, then generously slathered with apple butter. Unlike jam, apple butter offered depth. Slow-cooked apples flavored with cinnamon, cloves, and sugar until thick and spreadable. For rural families, it was nearly free, since apples were plentiful and preserving them was a yearly task. Families spent entire days in autumn boiling pots of apples into apple butter, canning jars that would last throughout the winter. On frosty mornings, few things felt as comforting as warm toast with spiced apple butter melting into its surface. The flavor was rich, wholesome, and tied directly to the land outside the kitchen. Children grew up associating its smell with safety, family, and the rhythms of the farm. Today, processed spreads dominate shelves, but jars of apple butter still carry that old flavor of memory. It deserves a comeback, reminding us of when mornings began with something sweet, simple, and homemade. I know for a fact you've all grown up on some of your grandparents' baked ziti, especially if you have some Italian roots, and if you do, then you share that in common with this dish. Right from the streets of Italy, immigrants first brought this dish over in the middle of the 19th century throughout the early start of the 20th one, so it had a lot of time to become something that people could love and associate with the finer things in life. People had a lot of time by the mid-20th century to try this dish, and plenty of families had passed their own secret baked ziti recipes down. The baked ziti really hit its highest highs during that time period in the 1950s to the 1970s, and it was something you could enjoy at both a potluck and a fancy at-home date. It was a staple of Italian-American cooking, and you could even find it at weddings. I, for one, think that really speaks to how popular the dish was, but what's your experience with this dish? And if you don't have any yet, is it something you'd ever try out? Black-eyed pea fritters, also known as Hoppin' John patties, took a New Year's Day tradition and gave it a whole new texture. Hoppin' John was the classic soul food dish: black-eyed peas, rice, and a little bit of pork cooked up for luck, prosperity, and a full belly. But not everyone wanted the spoon and bowl version. Some families took the leftovers, mashed them up, added flour and seasoning, and fried them into crispy patties. Golden on the outside, tender on the inside, and full of smoky, earthy flavor. They were easy to make, easy to eat, and could feed a crowd without costing much of anything. You would see them served with greens, cornbread, or just by themselves as a snack. And just like the traditional Hoppin' John, these fritters were a symbol of making do, of looking forward, and of not letting anything go to waste. These days, most folks do not even make the original dish, let alone the fried remix. But if you ever had one of these crisped-up patties with a dash of hot sauce, you knew luck was already on your side. And speaking of snacks with history, the next dish was salty, tender, and scooped straight from a roadside stand, if you were lucky enough to catch it while it was hot. Beef and oatmeal. Porridge bake was a thrifty casserole that stretched every bit of ground beef when meat was expensive and families needed food to last. Oats were cheap, filling, and widely available, so cooks combined them with seasoned beef, eggs, and milk to bake into a hearty dish. It looked simple but carried a comforting smell that filled kitchens during tough times. The oats absorbed the juices of the beef, creating a texture that was surprisingly satisfying and much more substantial than the meat alone. Children who grew up in the 1930s and 1940s often recalled this dish as a weekly staple, where no one went hungry even when paychecks were scarce. It was a casserole that taught resourcefulness, showing how something as humble as oats could stretch 1 pound of beef to feed a large family. Grandparents often looked back at it fondly, not as a luxury, but as a reminder that creativity in the kitchen meant survival and security. Cornbread and milk supper was what families ate when the pantry was nearly bare. A leftover wedge of cornbread crumbled into a bowl, covered with cold milk or tangy buttermilk, became dinner without complaint. It was cool and soft, with just enough salt and sweetness to feel like comfort. Hill folk did not see this as poor eating. They saw it as good sense. Every crumb mattered. Every drop of milk earned its keep. On hot summer nights, this meal kept folks full without firing up the stove again. It carried the quiet rhythm of old kitchens, simple, clean, and made from what you had. Some would drizzle a little molasses over top or sprinkle sugar if they had extra. Kids slurped it down, while elders remembered the hard times that taught them gratitude. Cornbread and milk supper was proof that even in scarcity, there was dignity, taste, and the kind of peace that only home-cooked food could bring. Adding a pinch of coffee grounds to gravy was grandmother's secret weapon for achieving deep, mysterious richness that made Sunday dinners unforgettable. Nobody could identify what made her gravy different. Darker, more complex, with savory depth that lingered. A tiny spoonful of unused grounds stirred into pan drippings before adding flour created gravy that tasted like it simmered for hours. Coffee didn't make gravy taste like breakfast. It enhanced meaty, roasted flavors while adding professional-looking color. This worked especially well with beef and pork gravies, where slight bitterness balanced meat-fat richness. Grandma learned it from her mother during hard times when stretching flavor meant stretching resources. The grounds also helped thicken gravy slightly. Modern recipes never mention this addition, leaving cooks wondering why their results taste flat compared to Grandma's legendary version. If you believe that using every part of the animal is a modern concept, you are mistaken. Dust Bowl families were not sparing any part of the pig, including the snout. Pig snouts breaded might sound like something you dare a friend to eat, but during the Great Depression, it was a delicacy. When meat was a rare commodity, the snout was a cheap source of something meaty, chewy, and quite palatable. The snouts were washed, cooked until soft, and then breaded before being deep-fried to golden brown. The result? A crispy outside and a very tasty meat on the inside. Well, yes, the texture may have been somewhat unusual, but when you are hungry, you don't mind. Real quick, if you're loving this content as much as we loved making it, hit subscribe to stay connected and help us reach even more amazing folks like you. To Dust Bowl families, pig snouts breaded were not just edibles, but a way to pay tribute to every pound of what little they had. No part was wasted, while such meals ensured that scarcity became resourcefulness. Nowadays, breaded pig snouts can be found only in some culinary forums, but they are a vivid example of how people tried to feed themselves when there were no chips, but snouts. Would I try it? To put it in perspective, if my grandma was to prepare it with a wink and a smile, I'd be willing to take a bite. Indeed, when you survive, you become brave and perhaps a little curious. But would you try it? Leave us the answer in the comments below. Turkey tetrazzini was a creamy spaghetti casserole that turned holiday leftovers into a beloved family meal. Tender strands of pasta mixed with roasted turkey, mushrooms, and peas were coated in a velvety sauce of butter, flour, and milk before being topped with breadcrumbs and baked until golden. The dish transformed scraps of turkey into something elegant and filling, stretching a small amount of meat to feed a large table. The smell of garlic and Parmesan drifting from the oven brought everyone to the kitchen long before dinner was served. Parents loved its economy and reliability, while children delighted in the crunchy breadcrumb topping that hid a luscious interior. In the 1980s, when home cooks valued hearty one-dish meals, turkey tetrazzini fit perfectly, offering comfort and a touch of sophistication without straining the budget. It remains a quiet legend of weeknight creativity, a recipe that once defined family togetherness and now lingers mostly in memory for those who tasted its rich, creamy charm. Frog eye salad was one of the most memorable creations ever to appear at church gatherings and holiday tables. Despite its unusual name, it was simply tiny acini di pepe pasta tossed with fruit, custard, and whipped topping. The little pasta beads looked like frog eyes, giving the dish its playful name. Cans of pineapple, mandarin oranges, and sometimes cherries were folded in, making it sweet and colorful. Families loved how it combined pantry staples into something that seemed exotic and fun for the time. The creamy custard coated every bite, while the fruit added bursts of freshness. It became especially popular at family reunions, where large bowls could feed dozens with ease. Children always reached for it first, delighted by its sweetness, while adults appreciated its light but filling nature. Frog eye salad may sound strange today, but it once brought joy, laughter, and a splash of color to community tables across America. City chicken contained no chicken at all. It was cubed pork or veal threaded onto wooden skewers to resemble drumsticks, breaded and fried or baked until golden brown. This Depression-era invention persisted through the 1970s in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and other industrial cities where immigrant families had perfected the recipe generations earlier. The name came from a time when chicken was expensive and pork was cheap, so frugal cooks created an imitation that became beloved in its own right. The cubes were dredged in seasoned flour or cracker crumbs, then browned before finishing in the oven with gravy. The skewers made the dish fun and portable. Children could eat them like drumsticks, while adults appreciated the tender meat. Polish, Slovak, and Italian families each claimed their own variations. City chicken represented the ingenuity of working-class cooks who transformed humble ingredients into something almost celebratory. This dish has nearly vanished outside ethnic enclaves. One-crust vegetable pie was a budget-saving marvel hiding in plain sight. In the pages of countless Depression-era and wartime cookbooks, you'd find this clever suggestion: skip the top crust. Why? Because flour, lard, and butter were rationed, and a double crust was considered an unnecessary luxury. Instead, home cooks would pour a simple vegetable filling, often made from onions, carrots, potatoes, or cabbage, into a single pie shell and bake it until golden. These pies weren't flashy, but they were hearty, reliable, and warm. The single crust cut costs in half while still delivering the texture and comfort people craved. Occasionally, if a family had a little meat on hand, they'd chop it finely and mix it into the filling to boost the flavor and stretch it further. Cheese, if available, might go on top. But most often, it was just vegetables, a thickened sauce, and that humble base of baked dough. It was more than enough. The one-crust pie reflected the kind of frugality that didn't feel like deprivation. It felt like smart, resourceful living. For people managing rations and rising prices, it offered something surprisingly rich, the feeling that dinner was still something to look forward to. Old-fashioned stuffed peppers were a triumph of economy. Bell peppers, once cheap and plentiful, became edible bowls for a mix of rice, ground beef, and tomato sauce, the holy trinity of Depression-era kitchens. They baked slowly until the peppers softened and the filling fused into a single, savory heart. The smell of it meant Sunday had arrived, a day when the family gathered and ate together no matter what the week had been. For many, it was the closest thing to celebration they could afford. Colorful, hearty, and proud. Each pepper stood upright in the pan like a promise kept. No one would go hungry tonight. Some cooks added breadcrumbs or leftover vegetables to stretch it further. The result was always the same, a meal that filled the stomach and comforted the soul. Stuffed peppers were proof that creativity was as essential as any ingredient. Cheese and olive relish trays were a simple yet effective way to encourage conversation and sharing at church potlucks. These trays typically featured a selection of cubed or sliced cheeses alongside an assortment of olives, pickles, and sometimes pepperoncini peppers. Arranged attractively on a platter, this combination invited guests to nibble and mingle as they sampled different flavor pairings. The salty, briny taste of olives complemented the creamy, mild cheese varieties, offering a balance of textures and tastes that were appealing and easy to eat with fingers or small forks. These relish trays required little preparation, but made a big impact by adding variety to the potluck spread. They were particularly popular because they did not need heating and could be prepared well in advance, making them convenient for busy hosts. The trays also reflected the growing interest in appetizer-style foods during the mid-20th century, as Americans explored new ways to entertain and socialize around food. Deviled ham-stuffed tomatoes were a dish that practically winked at you from the plate. bright red tomatoes scooped out just enough to hold a spoonful of something salty, creamy, and just a little mischievous. Deviled ham was not for the shy. It had that kick, thanks to mustard, maybe a splash of hot sauce, and the tang of finely chopped pickles. Mixed with chopped egg and a bit of celery crunch, it was both retro and refined. The tomato made it springtime. It turned a heavy spread into something cool, juicy, and fresh. This was not a winter food. This was the kind of thing you served on glass platters, maybe at a bridal shower or a church potluck. You could make a dozen in minutes and watch them disappear even faster. In the 1970s, this was what passed for finger food with flair. It had personality. Today, we do not see stuffed tomatoes often. Deviled ham has faded from memory, replaced by chicken salad or something store-bought. But one bite of the old version, and you remember why it worked. The tomato held it all together. The ham kept it interesting, and the whole thing just felt like a party on a plate. Quick rice pudding cups were a way to turn cold leftovers into a comforting breakfast in minutes. When families had leftover rice from dinner, mothers would reheat it in milk with sugar, raisins, and cinnamon until it became creamy. The result was a warm, sweet dish that could be eaten straight from the pot or poured into cups for the children. It was inexpensive, easy to prepare, and felt like a treat, even though it was made from scraps. Kids loved the raisins and spice, and adults enjoyed how filling it was without being heavy. Rice was cheap and kept well, which made this dish a dependable fallback whenever mornings were rushed. Instead of throwing out leftovers, people turned them into something delicious that carried them through the day. It was practical but comforting, proof of how resourceful home cooks were in mid-century America. Over time, convenience cereals replaced it, but many still remember a bowl of warm rice pudding as a childhood favorite. Today, it is rare to see rice pudding served at breakfast, but it once held a proud place at the table. Quick, sweet, and hearty, it was too delicious to truly deserve being forgotten. Hoppin' John is a dish that has some pretty rich heritage. I'm talking about African, Caribbean, and Native American roots that all boil together in the melting pot known as the South, where it first started becoming really trendy. However, the origins of the dish are actually a bit darker than just a happy coincidence that somehow got into everyone's table. Though the people who were eating it happily wouldn't know, it was first created and brought over by enslaved Africans in the American South. It made use of African rice and pork, and yes, the best part of the dish were the black-eyed peas even in those times. Now, as far as the name Hoppin' John is considered, nobody really ever knew where it first came from, or if there was a John who made this dish and brought it into everyone's lives, but the first time this name was mentioned was in the 1840s in a print. If you were down in the South and African American communities during New Year, then you would especially see a lot of Hoppin' Johns everywhere. The aroma of those peas and the smoked pork wouldn't miss anyone's nose, as the scent carried for miles and miles away. It was eaten specifically on New Year's because it was a common belief that eating Hoppin' Johns would bring good luck to people if they ate it to start the year. If you went into any new year with such a good plate of food, I'd say your luck was already pretty good. So maybe it does work? Beef and cornmeal dumpling stew was a dish that warmed families during hard winters when meat was scarce, but bellies still needed filling. Ground beef was cooked into a simple broth with vegetables, and then spoonfuls of cornmeal dough were dropped on top to steam into dumplings. The result was a hearty stew, where the dumplings absorbed the beefy flavor, creating a meal that stretched a small amount of meat into something satisfying. Cornmeal was cheap and abundant in many households, making it the perfect choice for bulking up dishes like this one. Families appreciated how it was both thrifty and comforting, feeding several people with just a few affordable ingredients. It was the kind of recipe passed along in community cookbooks and remembered fondly by grandparents who knew how much it meant to sit around the table with something warm and filling. This stew reflected both resilience and ingenuity in cooking with limited means. Fried cornbread hoe cakes were the sound of supper sizzling in a skillet. Cornmeal, water, salt, and a little grease were all you needed to turn a handful of nothing into a golden brown meal. Hillbilly kitchens loved this trick because it was fast, cheap, and never disappointed. You would drop spoonfuls of batter into the pan, listen for that familiar hiss, and wait for the edges to crisp. Hoe cakes were bread, but they were also pride, a way to make the table feel full even when meat was missing. They paired with beans, greens, and gravy, soaking up every last bit of flavor. No fork was needed, just hands and hunger. The smell alone could stop anyone passing by. Fried cornbread hoe cakes were the mountain version of comfort food, simple fried perfection that spoke louder than any recipe ever could. They were proof that flavor comes from fire, patience, and heart. Stale bread revived with water was grandmother's refusal to waste a single slice when the loaf turned hard and dry overnight. Instead of tossing it for the birds or grinding it into crumbs, she ran the entire loaf quickly under the faucet, letting water dampen the crust without soaking through to the center. Then she wrapped it tightly in foil and placed it in a hot oven for 10 minutes. The bread emerged soft, warm, and steaming as if freshly baked that morning. The water turned to steam inside the foil, rehydrating the crumb while the crust crisped up perfectly. This trick worked for rolls, baguettes, and any yeast bread that had dried out on the counter. Children couldn't tell the difference between revived bread and fresh, and families stretched their grocery dollars further. The technique represented Grandma's fundamental belief that food deserved respect and second chances before being discarded. If you've ever walked the streets of downtown New York, I'm sure you're familiar with the infamous pastrami on rye. If your grandma's from the Big Apple, chances are her recipe is highly regarded. This sandwich became a staple in Jewish delis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thanks to Eastern European immigrants. This one just featured an old-fashioned slice of pastrami on rye bread and a dollop of mustard. Grandma knew that when it came to sandwiches, sometimes less is more, and pastrami on rye is the perfect example of that. But hey, don't forget no pastrami on rye is complete without a pickle on the side. The tartness of a dill pickle or the sweetness of a bread and butter pickle is the perfect contrast to the savory pastrami. Zucchini lasagna casserole arrived during the health-conscious wave that swept through the 1980s when people wanted lighter versions of their favorite comfort foods. Instead of thick pasta sheets, thinly sliced zucchini stood in for noodles, layered with ricotta cheese, tomato sauce, and a gentle sprinkle of Italian herbs. This clever swap pleased parents who were counting calories while still delivering the hearty, cheesy satisfaction of traditional lasagna. Families often grew zucchini in backyard gardens or bought it cheaply at roadside stands, so the dish quickly became a thrifty yet modern choice. When it baked, the kitchen filled with the same inviting scent of garlic and tomatoes, and children hardly noticed the absence of pasta. It proved that a vegetable-heavy dinner could still taste indulgent, and many people proudly served it to guests to show that healthy eating did not mean bland food. The casserole embodied the decade's push toward fresh produce and creative home cooking while holding on to the nostalgia of old Italian-American favorites. Copper penny salad got its name from the shiny round carrot coins that made up its base, glistening after being marinated in a tangy tomato and vinegar dressing. Housewives loved this dish because it could be made ahead, stored in the refrigerator, and pulled out whenever company dropped by. The carrots were sliced thin, then tossed with onion rings and chopped bell peppers before being soaked in the zesty red sauce. After chilling, the flavors melded together, creating a sweet, sour bite that felt refreshing alongside heavier dishes like fried chicken or pork chops. It was a favorite for picnics because it traveled well and only tasted better after a day in the fridge. Children often ignored plain carrots, but the bright dressing and peppers made them exciting enough to try. Copper pennies salad was thrifty, flavorful, and attractive in a way that made it a staple of mid-century tables. Though rarely spotted today, it once represented the cleverness of turning a humble carrot into the star of the meal. Kielbasa and sauerkraut was the workingman's feast in Polish, German, and Eastern European communities across industrial America. Fat links of smoked kielbasa were nestled into beds of tangy sauerkraut, sometimes with potatoes or apples added, and simmered until the flavors married into something deeply satisfying. The sausage released smoky fat into the kraut while absorbing its briny sharpness, creating a balance of rich and sour that demanded cold beer and dark bread alongside. Steelworkers, miners, and factory hands brought this dish to union hall gatherings where it fed crowds economically. The sauerkraut could be homemade, fermented in crocks, or store-bought. Either way, the result was comfort on a plate. Mothers knew exactly how long to simmer until the kielbasa skin snapped perfectly when bitten. This dish represented immigrant heritage maintained through food, connecting factory workers to old-world traditions. It survives in ethnic enclaves but has largely vanished from mainstream American tables. Reused pickle juice marinade might sound odd today, but back then it was a beloved trick that saved both money and flavor. When a jar of pickles was finished, the brine left behind was never poured down the drain. Instead, frugal home cooks would use it to marinate meats, soak onions, dress potato salads, or even brighten up beans. The vinegar and spices acted like an instant flavor booster, turning bland ingredients into something tangy, zippy, and unexpectedly delicious. Pickle brine also tenderized cheaper cuts of meat, making it a go-to solution for tougher steaks or leftover roast. In fact, the practice was so widespread that old cookbooks listed pickle juice right alongside salt and pepper in many recipes. Some even recommended saving different types of brine, dill, sweet, or hot, and matching them to particular dishes. It was all part of the waste-nothing attitude of the time. Even if your pantry was nearly empty, you could make dinner feel interesting again with nothing more than a splash of what was left in the pickle jar. It's proof that creativity doesn't need fancy ingredients, just a good memory, a bit of vinegar, and a whole lot of heart. Cabbage and sausage stew was winter's answer to hunger. In homes where meat was precious, a single sausage could flavor an entire pot. Cabbage, onion, and potato took up the rest, slow-cooked until they soaked in every drop of smoky richness. The broth was peppery, the smell both humble and hearty. Served in thick bowls with bread, it was the kind of meal that made the world seem softer for a little while. This dish crossed cultures, found in Polish, German, and African American kitchens alike, each with its own rhythm and seasoning. It was proof that good food did not need abundance, only attention. The stew tasted better the next day, its flavors deepening as the cabbage gave up its sweetness. It was the kind of meal that asked for nothing but gave everything: warmth, comfort, and the quiet assurance that spring would come again. Stuffed zucchini boats with ground turkey were the compromise that made everyone at the table nod in agreement. You took fresh zucchini, sliced them lengthwise, and scooped out just enough to make a cradle. Inside went sautéed ground turkey, onion, breadcrumbs, and herbs. Sometimes a bit of tomato paste or Parmesan cheese to bind it all together. Then into the oven until the tops turned golden and the zucchini softened just enough to be fork tender. In the 1970s, this felt modern, healthy but hearty, a little trendy but still familiar. It showed up in casseroles and clamshell recipe books, usually next to cheerful illustrations of smiling vegetables. It was the kind of thing a mom would make on a Tuesday to prove that dinner did not always have to come from a box. And it worked. The turkey brought the savory, the zucchini brought freshness, and the whole thing looked impressive without taking hours to make. Today, stuffed vegetables are often too fussy or too fancy, but these boats floated right in the middle, simple, flavorful, and unmistakably spring. They did their job without showing off, and sometimes that is exactly what you need. Oatmeal with molasses was one of those breakfasts that carried families through the morning without any unnecessary effort or wasted time. Before instant oatmeal packets with added sugars and artificial flavors crowded grocery shelves, most households relied on simple rolled oats boiled on the stove with a drizzle of molasses for sweetness. It was hearty, thick, and carried a distinct richness that set it apart from lighter maple syrup. Families appreciated it because molasses was inexpensive, widely available, and often already stocked in pantries for baking, canning, or preserving. A bowl of oats simmering on the stove, then served steaming with molasses poured across the top, was comforting in a way that stuck with people. It was more than just fuel. It was tied to thrift, resourcefulness, and home. Kids sometimes complained about the strong flavor, but mothers knew it filled them quickly and lasted until lunchtime. Workers heading to long shifts also leaned on it, since oats were dependable and molasses did not spoil easily. It was simple, practical, and strong. Forgotten today, oatmeal with molasses remains one of those breakfasts that deserves a return to the table for both comfort and memory. Handmade butter used to be a really simple kitchen staple at home, and it started to be reborn as a gourmet product when people really got into the crafts and works aspect of it. See, people like things they made on their own. It gives them a chance to show off on Instagram, it gives them something to talk about with their friends, or it just becomes something cool to speak about on a date. You know, a cute and quirky little fact about yourself that helps break the ice. Besides that, there's also the authenticity and uniqueness of a completely 100% homegrown and homemade product. In a world full of preservatives, food dyes, artificial flavorings, and added vitamins and minerals, something that's actually just made out of the stuff God put on earth and nothing else is a relief. The revival of artisanal butter throughout the 2000s to today was really helpful in giving it a new image. High-end restaurants started serving cultured butters, and they even started putting hand-churned ones up for sale. There was a premium price you had to pay, but man, the suburban moms fell for it so bad. Roast chicken with stuffing and green beans is a meal that evokes family gatherings, holidays, and a sense of home. This classic dinner has long been a centerpiece of American dining, combining practicality with elegance. Roasting chicken is one of the oldest cooking methods, but by the 20th century, it became a weekly tradition for many households. Chickens were relatively inexpensive, easy to prepare, and, if seasoned and roasted just right, deliciously satisfying. The key to a perfect roast chicken lies in the balance: crispy golden skin on the outside and juicy, flavorful meat inside. Stuffing or dressing, depending on your regional preference, traces back to ancient Rome. By the time it reached American kitchens, cooks used bread cubes, herbs, and sometimes vegetables to create the savory, aromatic side we know today. While traditionally cooked inside the bird, many began baking it separately for a crispier texture, what some might call progress. Green beans complete this trio, often sautéed with garlic, almonds, or a touch of bacon. They brought a fresh, vibrant contrast to the richness of the chicken and stuffing. If you roast a chicken and make stuffing, you're not just making dinner, you're making memories. And for anyone who's ever had the leftovers, the memories taste just as good the next day. Beef stuffed bell bread loaf was the kind of recipe that showed just how creative cooks could be with ground beef in mid-century kitchens. A bread loaf would be hollowed out, stuffed with seasoned beef, onions, and sometimes cheese or vegetables, then baked until the crust turned golden. It was easy to slice into portions, which made it perfect for church potlucks, neighborhood gatherings, or just large families who needed to stretch their food. The bread soaked up all the juices from the beef and onions, creating a savory flavor that was hearty without being wasteful. It was the kind of dish you could pick up with your hands, simple and filling yet always welcomed at the table. This meal reflected a time when even something as ordinary as bread could be repurposed into a centerpiece. For many grandparents, it was a memory of shared meals, laughter, and the kind of clever recipes that turned necessity into tradition. Fried cabbage and onions was the meal that turned scraps into a feast. You started with whatever you had: a small head of cabbage, a tired onion, and the last spoonful of bacon grease from breakfast. Toss it all into a cast iron skillet and let it fry until the edges browned and the smell filled the house. There was no recipe written down, just instinct and a good ear for the sound of sizzling vegetables. This dinner showed what made hillfolk cooking special: the ability to turn nothing into something worth sitting down for. It was hearty, smoky, and comforting, the kind of dish that could hush an empty stomach and still leave leftovers for breakfast. Paired with a hunk of cornbread or a slice of salt pork, it reminded everyone that flavor did not come from money. It came from patience. Sometimes the simplest meals were the ones that made life feel rich. Vinegar added to poaching water was the difference between restaurant-quality poached eggs and stringy disasters. Grandma's eggs held together in perfect teardrops, whites wrapped snugly around golden yolks without wispy tentacles floating everywhere. Her secret was splashing white vinegar into simmering water before cracking eggs into the pot. The acid caused whites to coagulate faster, setting the outer layer before it could drift apart. This created compact, beautiful eggs rather than ragged messes. The amount didn't need to be precise. A tablespoon or two per quart was plenty, and vinegar flavor cooked away completely. Grandma also swirled water gently before dropping eggs, creating a vortex helping whites wrap around yolks. She knew to use the freshest eggs since older ones had thinner whites that spread regardless. This simple addition transformed a frustrating task into something achievable. Potatoes had more use than just what was under all the layers. Once peeled, people would often fry the potato skins as a midday snack. Nothing would ever go to waste in homes back then, as you must have gathered by now. If they can make stuff out of sausage drippings and drain the fat from bacon to reuse, frying up some potato skins does not seem that out of the box at all. These fried skins were the perfect sidekick to potato pancakes, and the fact that the skins had a lot of health benefits made it all the more appealing. Things like this really helped to keep appetites in check, and that meant that the financial situation of the home would be calmer too. Teriyaki London broil brought a burst of Asian-inspired excitement to the 1980s dinner table and quickly became a family favorite for home cooks eager to explore new flavors without leaving their kitchens. A lean cut of beef was marinated for hours in a mixture of soy sauce, garlic, brown sugar, and a splash of ginger, allowing the flavors to seep deep into the meat before it hit the broiler or grill. As it cooked, the sweet and savory glaze caramelized into a shiny coating that perfumed the air with a scent both foreign and comforting. Thin slices revealed tender beef with a gentle sweetness that paired perfectly with steamed rice or simple vegetables. Families loved how the recipe fit easily into busy schedules, since the marinade could be prepared the night before, and the cooking required little more than a hot oven and a watchful eye. It was a dish that felt modern and worldly while staying affordable, proving that a touch of soy sauce could open an entire decade of flavor possibilities for American families hungry for something different. 7-layer salad was the crown jewel of potlucks in the 70s and 80s, always showing up in its tall glass bowl so everyone could see each colorful layer. The crisp iceberg lettuce went down first, then bright peas, sliced boiled eggs, sharp onions, shredded cheese, and crumbled bacon, all stacked one on top of the other like a rainbow of familiar flavors. The final touch was a thick slathering of mayonnaise dressing spread across the top like frosting, sealing everything in until serving time. This dish was not about being fancy. It was about being filling, showy, and perfect for feeding a crowd. Families loved how it could be prepared ahead and kept in the fridge, ready to unveil at church socials or neighborhood suppers. Children poked through the layers looking for their favorite bites, while adults admired the simple but clever presentation. It was hearty enough to be a meal, but always served as a side dish alongside casseroles or fried chicken. Though rarely made today, 7-layer salad once stood as a proud example of resourceful cooking and community spirit stacked in a bowl. Porcupine meatballs got their playful name from the rice mixed into the meat, which poked out like little quills after cooking in tomato sauce. Working mothers loved this dish because it stretched a pound of ground beef into enough food for a family of 6 while adding extra carbohydrates. The meatballs were simple: ground beef mixed with raw rice, onion, egg, and seasonings, then browned and simmered in canned tomato soup thinned with water. As they cooked, the rice absorbed liquid and expanded, creating those distinctive spiky protrusions. Children found the name amusing and the taste familiar, making this an easy sell at family tables. The tomato sauce became rich and meaty during the simmer, perfect for spooning over mashed potatoes. Factory workers came home to find these waiting in covered skillets, still warm from afternoon cooking. This clever dish has largely disappeared from modern kitchens, though it once represented exactly the resourceful cooking that kept blue-collar families fed. Bacon grease jar cooking was more than a habit. It was a household tradition passed down through generations. After cooking bacon, no one ever threw out the grease. It was poured into a tin can, jar, or ceramic container and kept right on the stove or in the fridge, ready to use in just about everything. This rendered fat added smoky, savory depth to greens, eggs, cornbread, gravies, and even biscuits. For families on a budget, it was a goldmine of flavor that cost nothing extra. Some cooks would use it to start soups and stews, others to fry potatoes or season beans. A little bacon fat could turn the most humble vegetable into a side dish worth remembering. Cookbooks from the 1940s and 50s often listed bacon drippings as a key ingredient, not just a substitution. And when butter or lard was hard to find during wartime rationing, bacon grease picked up the slack with ease. It was efficient, it was tasty, and it felt like a little act of defiance, taking a scrap and making something wonderful with it. Even today, some home kitchens still keep a jar on the back burner because good flavor never goes out of style. Cabbage roll casserole was born from necessity, a way to capture all the comfort of stuffed cabbage without the time or patience it demanded. Housewives layered shredded cabbage with ground beef, rice, and tomato sauce in deep enamel pans, letting it bake slowly until the flavors melted together. The cabbage softened, the rice swelled, and the beef seasoned everything with richness far beyond its cost. The scent filled the home. Sweet cabbage, tangy tomato, and that unmistakable warmth of food meant to last for days. It was a dish of resourcefulness, created by people who could turn a single pound of meat into something that fed six. Served steaming from the oven, it carried both nourishment and pride. Every spoonful tasted like a small victory over scarcity, like love stretched thin but still holding strong. In many homes, it was Sunday dinner and Monday lunch, its flavor deepening with each reheating. Though forgotten by most modern tables, cabbage roll casserole once stood as proof that a little imagination and a lot of care could transform thrift into comfort. Potato salad with dill pickles offered a tangy twist on the classic potato salad and was a beloved side dish at 1950s church potlucks. This recipe typically combined boiled potatoes with mayonnaise, chopped dill pickles, onions, and sometimes hard-boiled eggs, creating a creamy yet zesty flavor profile. The inclusion of pickles added a crisp acidity that brightened the dish and balanced the richness of the dressing. Potato salad was practical and inexpensive to make in large quantities, making it ideal for feeding many at social gatherings. It could be prepared ahead of time and served chilled, which was convenient for church potluck events where refrigeration space might be limited. The salad paired well with a variety of main courses, from barbecue meats to baked casseroles, making it a versatile choice. Its popularity was boosted by its familiar flavors combined with a small element of surprise thanks to the dill pickles. This potato salad remains an iconic part of mid-century American communal dining experiences. Spinach, strawberries, and grilled chicken were not supposed to go together, until they did. This salad felt like a fresh breeze in a world of iceberg and ranch. It was light, yes, but it had drama. The spinach was tender, the strawberries sweet, the chicken just warm enough to make it feel like dinner. Poppy seed dressing poured over the top like sunshine in a jar. Sweet, tangy, creamy, and unforgettable. This was not a side dish. This was a centerpiece. And in the 1970s, it was revolutionary. People did not mix fruit and meat unless they were skewering kebabs. But somehow, this worked. It turned up at baby showers, springtime dinner parties, and those strange new health food cafes with wicker chairs and alfalfa sprouts on the counter. It was served in glass bowls that showed every layer because the color was half the point. And when you tasted it, you felt like maybe, just maybe, healthy food could actually taste good. Today, it is everywhere. Back then, it was a bold statement from a decade just starting to flirt with the idea of freshness. You did not forget a salad like this because it made you feel something clean, something bright, something just for spring. Cheese and crackers as breakfast may sound more like a snack today, but in many homes it was a simple stand-in when mornings were rushed. A small plate of cheddar cubes with butter crackers was quick to prepare and surprisingly filling. It was cheap, portable, and could be eaten in minutes, making it perfect for busy families in the mid-century. Housewives appreciated it because it required no cooking, just a quick slice of cheese from the block and a few crackers stacked on a plate. Kids liked the salty crunch, and parents knew the protein gave them enough energy to get through school. In rural towns where dairy was abundant, cheese was a constant presence on the table. Crackers stretched the meal further, making it both economical and convenient. Before sugary cereals dominated the breakfast market, this was the kind of quick plate that felt just fine to serve in a pinch. People did not think twice about replacing eggs or toast with cheese and crackers when time was short. It may not have looked glamorous, but it was one of those breakfasts that quietly kept families moving. Forgotten now, it was once a common, no-nonsense choice. On days when people would naturally get too tired of eating potatoes, they would always go for things like baked bean sandwiches. This was a filling, no-fuss meal that was especially loved by working-class homes that were doing labor-intensive work. They were very common in the Northeast, the Midwest, and different parts of the South, especially where any kind of construction was going on. It was also really helpful that so many brands had come out with such accessible and easy canned beans. These were cheap, required no effort to cook, and the result was something you could use in a soup, a sandwich, or a casserole. It just depended on what you were feeling that day. Either way, you were going to get a delicious meal. One of the biggest reasons I think this was as popular as it was is because people really began to rely on it during the Great Depression. Another good reason is that this was the perfect lunch for your kids, and it was so low effort that making it wasn't a hassle at all. Hamburger curry rice was a dish that reflected how American kitchens adapted global flavors in the 1950s and 1960s. Ground beef was simmered with onions, curry powder, and sometimes raisins or apples, then served over a bed of white rice. It was inexpensive, quick, and exotic enough to feel different without requiring costly ingredients. Rice stretched the meal further, making it a practical choice for large families who wanted something filling on a budget. The curry flavor brought a new excitement to the table, a reflection of how international dishes began to filter into everyday American cooking. Many households remembered it as one of the first recipes where they tasted something distinctly spiced beyond the usual salt and pepper. Grandparents might recall it as adventurous for the time, but also as a reminder that even ground beef could carry the flavor of faraway places. It was comfort food with a small spark of novelty that made it memorable. Potato salad with pickle juice was a Southern classic that delivered a tangy punch to an old favorite. Potatoes were boiled, cubed, and mixed with chopped eggs, celery, onions, and plenty of mayonnaise. The secret was adding brine straight from the pickle jar, which sharpened the flavors and gave the salad a brightness regular vinegar could not match. Some families used dill, others swore by sweet pickles, but both created a taste that stood out at picnics and church suppers. This salad was always served chilled, heaped into big bowls, and decorated with paprika on top for color. It paired well with barbecue, fried chicken, or anything pulled from the grill, making it a staple of summer gatherings. Over time, store-bought versions of potato salad became common, and the pickle juice trick faded. Yet once, this simple addition turned potato salad into something unforgettable. Chive and egg salad sandwiches were a signal that the garden was open for business again. You chopped the chives fresh, still wet from morning dew, and mixed them into mashed hard-boiled eggs with a touch of mayonnaise, salt, and pepper, maybe a dash of mustard, maybe not. The mixture was cool, pale yellow with little green flecks, and it went on to soft wheat bread with a leaf of lettuce for crunch. It was not just lunch, it was a feeling. It belonged on paper doilies and pastel plates. It showed up at baby showers, spring weddings, and any gathering that called for a pitcher of iced tea and a bowl of strawberries. In the 1970s, it was everywhere. It was modest but proud. It was the kind of thing you served when you wanted to show care without making a scene. Today, egg salad still lingers, but rarely with chives, rarely with charm. We forgot how something so simple could carry so much tradition. One bite, and you remember. The freshness, the softness, the sense that just maybe something lovely was blooming again outside your window. Cottage fried potatoes with eggs came from kitchens that wasted nothing, making sure even cold leftovers found a second life. Potatoes from last night's dinner would be sliced thin and tossed into a skillet with butter or meat drippings, crisping up golden within minutes. As the potatoes sizzled, eggs were cracked directly into the pan, frying in the same fat while soaking up the flavor. It was filling, inexpensive, and fast, the type of breakfast a farmhand or factory worker could eat before a demanding day. Children loved the crispy edges, while adults valued how quickly it came together on busy mornings. This was not a delicate breakfast. It was heavy, rustic, and designed to push hunger away until midday. Families in the mid-century leaned on meals like this, stretching what they had and avoiding waste. Potatoes were cheap and easy to grow, and eggs were staples few homes lacked. Together, they created a classic plate that has slipped away over time. Today, packaged breakfasts dominate, but nothing was quicker than frying potatoes and cracking an egg. For families with little more than pantry staples, stretching a meal was an art form. Tomato gravy. Over rice was a perfect example of how a handful of cheap ingredients could be turned into something warm, filling, and, on the right day, even delicious. Rice was affordable, easy to store, and could be cooked in large batches, making it a go-to base for struggling households. The tomato gravy itself was a simple mix of canned or fresh tomatoes, flour for thickening, and a little fat, usually bacon grease or lard, to give it depth. Some versions were smooth, others chunky, depending on what was on hand. When money was especially tight, even just tomato juice and water could create a thinner, more soup-like version. This dish had roots in the South, where tomato gravy was often served over biscuits. But during the Depression, rice became a common substitute since it was cheaper and stretched further. Leftovers weren't wasted either. Extra gravy could be poured over cornbread or mixed into the next day's meal. It was proof that a little creativity could turn a sparse pantry into a meal that still felt like home. Loved that. Poke salad greens were one of those dishes that demanded both courage and care. Pokeweed grew wild and fast, but it could turn dangerous if you did not boil it just right. Still, folks learned how to tame it. After boiling and rinsing it several times, they would fry it in bacon grease until tender and smoky. It became a side dish with real backbone, a plate full of green proof that mountain people could make a meal out of almost anything. Every bite carried a hint of the wild earth it came from. Eating poke salad was an act of both survival and defiance, a way to say, "We will eat well, even when the cupboard's empty." Served with cornbread or salt pork, it fed families through hard months when gardens were thin. In every community that made it, poke salad greens stood for resilience, bravery, and the genius of hungry folks who refused to go without. Wooden spoon across the pot prevented boil-over disasters that left stovetops covered in starchy foam and required hours of scrubbing. Grandma laid a wooden spoon horizontally across the top of any pot cooking pasta, rice, or potatoes, and somehow the water never climbed over the rim. The science involved temperature differences. Wood doesn't conduct heat like metal, so bubbles contacting the cooler spoon popped before they could cascade over. The dry surface also burst the foam's surface tension. This simple trick meant Grandma could step away from the stove to tend other tasks without returning to find a mess spreading across the burners. She didn't know the physics, but she knew the wooden spoon worked every single time. Children learned this instinctively, placing spoons across pots without being told, carrying the habit into their own kitchens decades later. It cost nothing and prevented countless cleanup headaches. Potato pancakes are one that we are very sad to have seen fade away from the arsenal of home chefs. Pancakes made with matzo or applesauce topped with garlic or fried onions made for such a mouth-watering meal. Low-income households back in those times were struggling to buy produce. Farmers' markets were uniformly unaffordable for middle-income households due to creeping inflation. People needed a vegetable that was cost-appropriate and easy to make in batches. Enter the potato pancake, which revolutionized the breakfast scene in a struggling time. As times improved, people slowly started going to more fancier and creative breakfasts, unfortunately leaving simpler dishes behind. Potato pancakes took a backseat in the face of changing food and economic trends, but anyone from the era will rave to you about the godsend these were. Tamale pie brought Southwestern flavors to blue-collar tables without requiring the time or skill that authentic tamales demanded. This casserole layered seasoned ground beef with tomatoes, corn, olives, and spices beneath a golden cornmeal crust that baked up crispy on top while staying soft underneath. Working mothers appreciated that it came together quickly, used inexpensive ingredients, and fed large families from a single dish. The cornmeal topping, made with milk, eggs, and sometimes cheese, puffed slightly in the oven and absorbed the spiced meat juices bubbling below. Children loved the mild heat and the contrast between soft filling and firmer crust. The dish represented practical adaptation of ethnic cuisines into forms that fit American kitchens and budgets. Church cookbooks featured countless variations, some adding beans, others incorporating enchilada sauce. Tamale pie was filling, flavorful, and affordable, yet it has largely vanished from modern family casserole rotations. The recipe survived the attic. She didn't survive long enough to teach them. Tell us what you found after someone was gone.